Greetings, friends. Welcome back to the broadcast. Today we're starting a new series, The Prophet Daniel and the Sovereignty of God. And this is one of the first, if you want to say, prophetic books that we went through on this podcast many years ago, when I had just really first started doing this. And so to say that it's overdue for a reboot is an understatement. And so that's what we're going to be doing for the next several weeks, is going through the prophet Daniel. Just some quick introduction and information about this time period and about the prophet Daniel real quick here. So Daniel was of noble birth. He was carried to captivity in Babylon in the 4th year of Jehoiakim, and this would have been around the year 606, and it's traditionally believed that it was when he was a child, but there's some traditions that say that Daniel was even an infant at the time of the captivity. At any rate, it was there that he was taught the learning of the Chaldeans. He held high offices, both under Babylon and Persian empires. He was persecuted for his religion, but was miraculously delivered. He lived to be a great age. So he must have been about 94 years old at the time of the last of his visions. The book of Daniel is partially historical, relating to various circumstances which befell him and the Jews at Babylon, but it's also prophetic, detailing visions and prophecies which foretell numerous important events related to the 4 great empires of the world, the coming and death of the Messiah, the restoration of the Jews, the conversion of Gentiles. All these things we find in the book of Daniel. Daniel's name, Daniel, means God is my judge, or God is judging. The major theme, though, we talked about how it's a historical book, it's a prophetical book, but the major theme, the overarching theme that you'll find here is the sovereignty of God over all nations. That's what you'll really see. Even when you take a look at Daniel's life, you see the sovereignty of God, the hand of God being upon him. Daniel's also a perfect example of how you can be a God-fearing, God-serving man and still prosper in a pagan situation. Here's Daniel in Babylon, still thriving. And because of his obedience to God, and obedience to his faith, you see God blessing him and giving him favor with people of positions of power. This should be a lesson to all of us. Whether it's because you go to work in a situation like that that's non-Christian, God can still give you favor with your boss and with the company. Whether it's in the nation in which you live, God can give you favor with those who are around you. The scriptures say that God knows how to judge and preserve his people at the same time. We see this happening. Israel is judged because it's become apostate, because it's gone whoring after other gods. And all of Israel is either killed or carried away to Babylon. And yet, God still preserves his own and gives them favor in the situations that they're in. So the main theme, again, that I think we'll see if we open up our minds and our hearts and our eyes is the sovereignty of God. Another thing to note, your modern Protestant Bibles won't have the chapters entitled Susanna and Bel and the Dragon or Bel and the Serpent. But it's important to note that when the canon was finalized and decided on in the year 382, it was part of the canon. Not only that, when we get to the first English Bibles, it's part of the canon. In fact, the King James Bible has both of those chapters included in it from the year 1611 till almost the year 1900. The Greek Septuagint has it included. Today, modern Catholic Bibles still have it. Modern Orthodox Bibles still have it. It's only not found in modern Protestant Bibles after the 1900s. So my view is, if the Holy Spirit thought it was good enough to be in the Scriptures for the first 1900 years of church history, then it's good enough for me. And so we will be covering those, but we will be doing them at the very end. However, it is important to note that some Bibles would have Susanna as kind of the opening chapter, and Bel and the Dragon as the closing chapter, but we're going to read both of those at the end. So today, we're just going to open with chapter 1 of the book of Daniel. And it's about, again, even the first chapter demonstrates Daniel's faithfulness to God and to living righteously. And we see God's favor upon his life. I pray that you'll be blessed by this study and encouraged and strengthened. And I think it's a study for our time, because we're living amongst a secular, godless world. And most of us who live in the West, our nations have become much more secular, much more pagan. So how are we to behave? How are we to respond in times such as these? I think the book of Daniel, and using Daniel as our model, will help us to navigate our current times and situations. So with that introduction, let's read chapter 1 of the prophet Daniel. Let's begin. Chapter 1. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. The Lord gave Joachim, king of Judah, into his hand, with some of the vessels of the house of God. Then he brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God. He carried them into the treasure house of his God. Then the king spoke to Ashpenaz, the chief of his eunuchs, to bring him some of the captives of Israel, and some of the royal family, and some of the nobles, young men in whom there was no blemish, but handsome, skilled in all wisdom, well-grounded in letters, intelligence, and prudent, and who had the ability to serve in the king's house, and whom they might teach the letters of the language of the Chaldeans. The king also appointed a daily provision for them from the king's table and from the wine he drank, and gave orders to educate them for 3 years. At the end of that time, they were to stand before the king. So please note, Israel's carried away captive to Babylon. Even vessels from the temple are brought in. It's a complete siege. Nebuchadnezzar says, I want the best, wisest, handsome young men that you can find. Give me the top of the top, and I want to have them brought in, educated in our ways, in the ways of the Chaldeans. I'm even going to give them food off of my table, food and wine off of my table. Verse 6. Now among them were Daniel, Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael, sons of the tribe of Judah. So the chief of the eunuchs gave them names. To Daniel the name Belshazzar, to Hananiah Shadrach, to Mishael Meshach, and to Azariah Abednego. But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the king's food, nor with the wine he drank therefore. He entreated to the chief of the eunuchs, that he might not defile himself. Now the Lord gave Daniel mercy and compassion in the sight of the chief of the eunuchs. So the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who ordered your food and drink, lest he see your countenance gloomy in comparison to the young men of your equals. Then you would endanger my head before the king. So Daniel said to Melzar, whom the chief of the eunuchs appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, test your servants for 10 days, and let them give us vegetables to eat and water to drink. After this, let our countenance be observed by you, and the countenance of the young men who eat at the king's table. Then deal with your servants as you see fit. So he agreed with their proposal and tested them 10 days. At the end of the 10 days, their countenance was observed, and they were more fit and stronger in body than the young men who ate at the king's table. Thus Melzar took away their food and wine and gave them vegetables instead. As for these 4 young men, God gave them understanding and insight and all letters and wisdom, and he gave Daniel understanding in all visions and dreams. So please note a couple of things that we need to point out. The first thing is Daniel recognizes that the food, the Babylonian food, if you will, is not going to be a healthy choice for him. Now, no question, there's probably some issues where the food's unclean, meaning probably contains pork and other things that would be unclean and not okay for a young Jewish man to eat, according to the law. But I think it's more than that. For example, he's refusing wine as well. Give us vegetables and water instead. Well, we know that Daniel fasted several times throughout, we'll see throughout his writing. And one of the things he fasts from is wine. So we know it's not like he feels like he's not allowed to drink wine. There's something more going on here. I think it's a combination of intelligence as it pertains to what's healthy, and, of course, making sure he's not eating anything that would defile himself, according to the law of Moses. I often have thought about this, because I think wise people in our day are still doing this, still refusing the Babylonian food. Here in America, a mass majority of the food supply isn't food. That's just facts, friends. The sad reality is, while 90% of the food supply is poison, non-food, cancer-causing, all kinds of health issues causing, while 90% of the food supply is like that, 90% of the people are ignorant about that reality. Even when people are trying to be healthy, they don't realize they're not. I'm not going to go into a whole thing because I could spend the next 4 hours talking about this. But if you have done the research and you use a little wisdom and you actually eat clean food and you resist the food of Babylon, you will notice that your health and your countenance and your appearance and the way you feel is going to be considerably better than your counterparts, than your family members, than the friends and people you work with. This is what's happening with Daniel. He says, put it to the test. And of course, the person in charge of the food does put it to the test, and he realizes that, hey, Daniel and his friends, who are only eating the clean food, the vegetables and drinking water, they are looking much better, much stronger, much healthier, and so he goes as far as to put all of them on that diet moving forward. Notice also, we talk about God's sovereignty. It says that God gave Daniel mercy and compassion in the sight of the chief of the eunuchs. You see, God's sovereignty is all over this. Daniel doesn't want to defile himself, and so God sways the heart, if you will, of the person in charge of him, giving him compassion and mercy for Daniel to comply with Daniel's request. And then, not only that, when we go to verse 17, it says, as for these 4 young men, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, as for these 4 young men, God gave them understanding and insight in all letters and wisdom, and gave Daniel understanding in all visions and all dreams. These are gifts from God to help Daniel and his friends prosper and thrive in Babylon. We're almost finished. Now, when their education was completed, the king ordered all the young men to be brought in. Thus the chief of the eunuchs brought them before Nebuchadnezzar. So the king spoke with them, and among all of them, none were found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they stood before the king. In every saying of wisdom and understanding about which the king examined them, they found them 10 times better than all the enchanters and wise men in all his kingdom. Thus Daniel continued until the first year of the reign of King Cyrus. So there you have the first chapter. Haven't gotten very far in, but it's important to note this. It's important to see God's hand in all of this. I mean, these 4 have been given this such great favor, right? The king examines them and finds them 10 times wiser than the natives, the ones who grew up in Babylon. How is this possible? Well, because God gave them that great wisdom and understanding to be able to study and receive that knowledge. God's favor is upon them. I pray that you've been blessed this morning with this introduction to the book of Daniel. I don't know about you, but it gives me hope reading Daniel. It shows me that no matter what the circumstances are, where I find myself, what kind of situation I find myself in, if I truly believe and trust in the one true God, the God of the creator of the universe, then he can give me favor and bless me and prosper me if I will just have the heart to serve him. Thank you for listening this morning. Please be praying for me and this podcast. I think this study is going to be a great blessing to us all. Peace and grace be with all of you. And until next time, God bless.